All right, everybody, welcome back. Sports Bash live on a Monday, and the Phils have the day off today, but a ton of things to discuss from over the weekend. Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad, is back, and of course, the Phillies making all sorts of national headlines. Joe Girardi, Gene Segura. It kind of stemmed from Saturday, Bob, went all the way to yesterday, and obviously the Phillies' optics not looking good as they have a day off today, which I guess is a good thing for them. Because they had a sloppy weekend down in Dunedin. It looked like maybe they were hitting the old haunts down in Clearwater Beach.
Sure did. Man, they go to Washington last week. They finally get that monkey off their backs. They get the road series victory, and they come out. They get a win in the opener with Vince Velasquez on the mound, and you're thinking, okay, they're playing a good Toronto team here, and they have an opportunity to win back-to-back road series, maybe finish this 9-game road trip over 500. And then they just, were completely asleep at the wheel on Saturday night. Just horrendous defensive play. Joe Girardi pleading after the game for his team to just simply catch the baseball. And then they go out yesterday early on, and Gene Segura does not do that. And things kind of boiled over there early in the game. And it was a mess on several different levels yesterday. And not all series losses and not all losses are created the same and have equal weight. Yesterday was about as ugly as it could possibly get on every single level for this team.
It was. And, I mean, you go back to Saturday night, lifeless, no runs, but they also don't feel the ball. And then early in the game yesterday, right back to not fielding the ball. But Girardi mentioned it. You coach, Bob. I mean, communication at that level, just to say, I got it. I mean, the fact that Maton and Segura can't even get that right, and then Segura right back the next day. I don't know what Girardi said to Segura in the dugout. That's a dugout conversation that will remain in the dugout, I guess. But is Girardi in the wrong here? Did he not handle this right? I mean, I know you're not down in Dunedin, and you guys don't have access anyway. You're not getting a chance to get in the actual press conferences. But, I mean, do you feel that Girardi kind of put some flames in this, or did he not handle this right?
I don't know if he handled it right or not, but I will say this. The good guy, mild-mannered, patient approach has not worked for this team. It did not work when Gabe Kapler was here, and it has not worked with Joe Girardi to this point. So, Girardi is certainly not exempt from blame. He has made his share of mistakes, last season and this season, especially this season. But that being said, this patient, mild-mannered stuff has not really translated. They've been very lackadaisical at times. They've made these mental mistakes, and so I did not mind seeing a little bit more of an aggressive call out a guy approach yesterday. And again, I don't know if that's going to translate to, them being a little bit more crisp defensively, or if it's going to mean that they clean up these mistakes. But what he has been doing has not worked. So yeah, maybe it's time to go after a guy and call him out.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be frustrating, too. He gets down there, and, I mean, his outfield yesterday, he's got 3 infielders out there. So as soon as I saw that lineup, I said, poor Chase Anderson. I mean, you got Miller and Kingery playing in the corners. Herrera is already awful in center. You've been talking about it, too. This is a bad defensive team, but it's also a team that is kind of forced upon him because of the injuries that this team has gone through.
Yeah, yesterday was especially amazing. I mean, I understand the team does not want to put Bryce Harper or JT Realmuto on the injured list. They had the day off today. I think that they'll kind of take stock and evaluate what they're going to do with these guys. Do they just need another night or two off? So I get not making a roster move there. But to enter that game yesterday morning, this is before Andrew Knapp got hurt, with one player on your bench. And I don't care if you're playing American League rules. It doesn't matter. You can't go into a game with one healthy bench player that is a catcher, which would have been Marchand in this instance if Knapp had started. Didi Gregorius has not played since the middle of last week. His elbow is swollen. He's not playing against the Marlins, at least not on Tuesday or Wednesday. So I don't understand why not just roll the dice, retroactively place him on the injured list, and bring somebody else up to just give yourself at least one more option. Because then it forces Bryce Harper, who's clearly hampered, into the game yesterday once Kingery gets hurt. And it was just a mess. You're like, here you are. You have their most important player, their franchise player is now in the game, visibly less than 100%. And he's up there swinging as the go-ahead run in the 9th inning. And it was a mess. It was, to be perfectly honest with you, I think that sometimes what we do is we look at the Phillies or we look at the team that we follow and we're hypercritical of that team. You know, the Braves are off to a slow start. I'm sure that that's been terrible to watch for the first month and a half. The Mets are only a half game better than the Phillies. I'm sure they've had their share of problems. The Nationals have underachieved. But the Phillies aren't just losing games. They're doing it in embarrassing fashion, whether it's defensive blunders on the field, roster miscalculations. It's just amazing. And the optics that this team presents to its fan base are just dismal.
Well put, Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad. The optics of everything here. So we're talking about the team on the field many times looks ill-prepared. I mean, as you kind of mentioned, these are Little League plays. Bob, you coach high school baseball. If your second baseman and shortstop don't make that play, I would imagine there's a spot right next to you on the bench for those two gentlemen who did not speak up to say, I got it. That ball's Maton's, I would imagine, though, right? And here's a young kid who's kind of, feeling his way. But Segura, I feel like, I don't know, infringed on him. Look, I'm not placing blame, but that's typically the shortstop ball, correct?
Yeah, typically you're going to have your shortstop take charge on that particular ball. Now, yeah, I mean, you said it, like, I coach varsity baseball. There's a certain level, and this is where I kind of stopped short of going all in on Joe Girardi for this type of play, especially. There's a certain level, a certain expectation that you have that players are going to know how to do certain things by the time they reach a certain level.
Yeah.
And so communicating on an infield pop-up is something that even at the high school varsity level with a functional team, you would expect 99 times out of 100, you're going to do that. So certainly at the major league level, I don't know if it's fair to point a finger at the manager and say, oh, hey, that's on Joe Girardi.
Right.
I mean, there is an expectation that play gets made in their sleep. Now, that being said, if you want to point a finger at Joe Girardi, I do think that some of his handling of the bullpen, I think that some of the lackadaisical play, like I use that word and I don't want to overuse it, but they just come out on certain nights and are just dead flat. And I do think that you can criticize him for that. So, I think everybody has a hand in this, but what we saw this weekend was just certainly unacceptable on all levels. And I think that that's why you saw what you saw from him post-game yesterday specifically.
Yeah. It looked to be a very frustrated Joe Girardi. I guess I should ask you, and again, this kind of goes to with the caveat that you guys are not have the same access that you've been rewarded in the past. But did Girardi and Segura not get along like that? It seemed like a pretty seamless thing. Like, hey, man, catch the damn ball. And did he feel like he got called out or singled out? But do they not have a good relationship, I guess?
There's nothing that really indicates that. Gene Segura has been a guy, though, historically that has had some issues in clubhouses, and that doesn't mean that he's having them here.
This is the first that I've heard of Segura or even seen Segura have this kind of, like, outburst.
Yeah, and so I do think that you have to kind of put that in the back of your mind. There was the hustle issue a couple of years ago when Gabe Kapler was here, but otherwise, we haven't really seen anything like that. And you're right. No, we have not been in the locker room. We have not been in the clubhouse before or after games. So some of that access kind of limits what we're able to kind of perceive and talk about and ask about. But no, I don't think so. I think that this was a situation where a manager made a point very publicly and adamantly on Saturday night. And then in the first inning, the very next day, I don't think that it was necessarily the physical error that took place. I don't think that he liked Gene Segura's approach to the baseball. It was kind of like cute, would be the word I would use. I think he was trying to be too cute. And I think that that's where Joe Girardi says, hey, listen, we're shorthanded. We're not making these plays. Like, you've got to do the basics. And my guess is that Gene Segura probably felt like that he was singled out, probably didn't like the tone, and he responded the way that he did.
How about, okay, we have the team sloppy on the field. We've got the manager not having his best managing, I guess you could say. What about the GM of this baseball team, who we haven't heard from since spring training?
Well, yeah, it's like, are you pointing the finger at Sam Fuld, or are you pointing the finger at Dave Dombrowski? My sense was when they first hired Dave Dombrowski that this was really going to be an evaluation year. Now, certainly they went out and they re-signed Didi Gregorius and JT Realmuto, and they made some moves in the back end of the rotation that have not panned out to this point. But they were aggressive. They spent some money, and that sort of kind of reset the expectations that, hey, they're going to try to win in 2021. But not at all costs. I think that there really was an evaluation period here where John Middleton brought in Dave Dombrowski to say, we have failed as an organization on almost every level now for the last 10 years. And our rebuild did not work. And I want you to evaluate what has gone wrong here. I want you to assess, as a guy that's been around the block, who's had success in multiple organizations, what do you see? And I really do think that this year is partly trying to go for it and partly, trying to get the fans back on board, post Matt Klentak after being so disgusted with that previous front office with Klentak and Andy McPhail. So I think they wanted to change the public's perception a little bit while trying to be competitive. But in the background, I do think that this year is about evaluation and assessing the overall direction of the franchise. And so here in mid-May, I don't know. What do you expect Dave Dombrowski to do? I think that if the team can prove that it can remain in contention come July, then I think you may see him do some things. But I don't really know what the general manager and the president of baseball operations is supposed to do at this point.
You mentioned a little bit about having only one guy available. Kingery runs into the wall. He has to come out, and they're forced to put Bryce Harper into the game. Now, what is Harper out for currently that he's unable to play? And you watch him try to bunt to try to get on, shows you almost everything you need to know, that he was unable to even swing the bat, and then he has to swing the bat to try to win the game late in that game. So another just optically poor look.
Yeah, it was a very curious look. Listen, if you're down 5 runs, you don't want to risk it with him taking a hack to high hell, right? But the situation being what it was, I understand that, but it's just a shame that the guy had to be put in that spot to begin with. And whether or not Joe Girardi had some input in the roster and the way that they went into yesterday's game, I don't know. Like, you don't really know who's responsible for what with the Phillies. I would imagine he had a say in it. So maybe Joe Girardi has, some of the blame should, fall at his feet for the fact that they went into yesterday's game in that situation where they would potentially have to put in a guy who's less than 100%. Whatever the case may be, it was an embarrassing outcome. And I do think that it's pretty revealing that he went out, went up his first time and had to bunt. I think that tells you where they're at with him right now. I don't think that they want to put him on the injured list, but I think in a perfect world, he'd sit down for 3 or 4 days and see if they could get this thing right.
All right. That said, you're playing Kingery in right field. I mean, I think we're all at the point now where I was a Kingery guy. I'm off, man. I can't back the guy anymore. I mean, he just looks lost. Zippo confidence. I mean, how much more of a leash does he have if you have all these injuries? I get it. He plays multiple positions, but is that even valuable to them anymore?
No, I believe, and this has not formally happened yet, but I do believe that Scott Kingery will probably go on the IL for concussion protocol, whether or not he's been diagnosed with one yet or not. I would expect them to make a roster move there. Had that injury not happened, even in light of all of the different injury issues that this team's had, I would have been stunned if the Phillies returned back to the city and had Scott Kingery on the major league roster to open up the series with the Marlins. He's 1 for 19 this season. He has 12 strikeouts. He cannot hit a belt-high 92-mile-an-hour fastball at this point. And, Mike, I got to tell you, with no exaggeration or no hyperbole, not to say that the guy can't be fixed if he, goes down in the minor leagues, maybe figures it out over a 2-3 month stretch. But right now, I have never seen such a useless Major League Baseball player suit up for this team. I mean, he can provide them with nothing, and it's a shame. And maybe one day he will be able to do that again. But right now, he's not good enough, and he knows it. And the Phillies know it.
Yeah, it's a shame because this was a guy we talked Friday that certainly looked like he was going to be a big part of this organization. And for whatever reason, it's been a total disaster. I'll leave with this. Chase Anderson, an inning and a third, 8 hits, 7 runs. ERA is up to almost 7 now. Do they got to? I mean, Spencer Howard's lined up on the same day as him, it looks like. So are we going to see a rotation with Spencer Howard and Vince Velasquez sooner than later?
Well, Vince Velasquez has certainly done enough to warrant at least another couple trips through the rotation. I don't think that the team's overly eager to get Matt Moore back in there. I think that they're kind of conceding that was a miscalculation this offseason. So, yeah, I do think it's entirely possible that we'll see that. I mean, listen, Chase Anderson's made a couple decent starts for this team. He was horrible yesterday, which has grossly inflated his ERA. But I would be shocked if they did that this next time through. But if we get one more clunker from him, I think that they would probably pull the trigger on that move.
All right, there you go. Phillies, rough weekend in Dunedin. 21-20, off day today. And their nemesis, the Marlins, are up next. We know that the Marlins have always seemed to give the Phillies fits. And, of course, Bob will be back on Friday as we'll take a look back at that series. And as you mentioned, the whole East is just jumbled up right now. Nobody really distinctly pulling away. But this team has a lot of very poor optics, as you wrote about over at crossingbroad.com. Bob Wankel, guys, here talking some Phils. Thanks, Bob.
Mike, thanks, man.
All right, and he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. We'll have plenty more, including a look at the NBA play-in games and possible matchups for the Sixers as Sirius XM NBA radio host, longtime NBA writer Mitch Lawrence will join me in the 5 o'clock hour, plus Jeff Kerr with his thoughts on how Ryan Kerrigan fits in with the Eagles. He, of course, signed with the Eagles earlier today. We got all that and more coming up this hour of the show, brought to you by Prop Swap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bets and take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com or download the Prop Swap app today. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.